Everyone, welcome back to the OrtoTech garage. My name is Keith. Have you ever wondered why your vehicle pulls one direction or another? Your steering wheel feels a little off center. Maybe your tires are wearing unevenly in certain areas. Today I want to talk to you about wheel alignments. I'm going to get into the process, what some of the numbers mean, and what things you should be looking out for to determine if you need a wheel alignment on your vehicle. So I'm standing here next to this computerized four-wheel alignment machine, and we're going to show you some of the steps of how to perform an alignment using this machine. Before I do that, I want to talk about some of the symptoms or conditions that you may experience which may cause you to think you need an alignment, or you may actually need an alignment. So a lot of clients are always asking me, do I need an alignment to do a certain period of time, a certain mileage, something along those lines, or they might have a particular problem. They think alignment is going to remedy that. And I just want to talk to you about some of the common symptoms. So probably number one on the list is the steering wheel being crooked. So if you're driving down the road straight, you're holding the wheel and it's turned off 30 degrees to the left or to the right, that's really a good indication that your alignment needs to be corrected. Even if it's off a small amount, a few degrees, usually an alignment can correct that. If you've got some kind of pulling or drifting problem, so in other words, you're driving down the road, you let go of the steering wheel, and all of a sudden the car darts to the right, darts to the left, or even drifts right or left with you letting go of the steering wheel, that's usually an indication that you've got an alignment problem. Now that doesn't mean it's always the problem. It's possible you've got some tires that are causing the car to pull in one direction or another. You may have an inflation problem. So one of the first things we always do before an alignment is check all the tire pressures. We want to make sure they're all inflated properly. We can oftentimes make some measurements on a car, but not necessarily make any adjustments on them. So this is something that can happen as well. So just to help you understand the process of alignment and the conditions that may cause you to need an alignment, we're going to walk through some of these things. I want to explain a little bit to you as we go about caster, camber, toe measurements, thrust angle, a couple of things to help you better understand what we're looking for with this machine, what this machine is trying to calculate for us as we go through the alignment process. Alignments can be an important part of your routine maintenance. It's generally recommended that you have your alignment at least checked every couple of years. It's fairly straightforward to go ahead and set the machine up, make some measurements to determine if you even need an alignment before you get started. Not a bad idea to do that. There's a lot of things that can cause your alignment to go out of specification. A lot of times it's just potholes in the road. You may have bumped a curb. Any of those types of things can kind of knock your alignment out. Normal wear of components underneath the car. So it's definitely advised that you get your alignment checked every once in a while. It doesn't necessarily mean you need it, but it's worth having checked. I want to walk through the setup on this machine, show you how we install the sensors on the wheels, show you how the measurements are taken, what's involved in that, give you a sneak peek at our screens here, what we get to see in the garage. And as I'm doing this, I want to talk a little bit about some of the angles that we're measuring, some of the things that we're seeing on the screen, and what we might do to correct those. There are a couple of steps we usually need to take before we perform an alignment service. The most important one is usually just giving the vehicle a good road test. We want to confirm the conditions that maybe the client has given to us, whatever their symptoms are. We want to make sure those things are actually happening. There's a lot of times people think they need an alignment, and we go and road test the vehicle, and it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it just needs a wheel balance. Maybe the brake rotors are vibrating, and that's what they're feeling, and they think it's an alignment. So it's really important for us, especially as technicians, that we get out on the road, we give it a little bit of a drive, and we make sure we confirm those conditions. Once we've done that, we'll bring it in the garage. We want to check all the tire pressures. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's important that all the tire pressures are set equally, because 5 or 10 pounds difference between the right side and the left side, especially in the front, can cause the vehicle to pull in the direction of the low tire. So it's always important we check that before we get started. And then the third thing we usually check, we want to make sure that there's no loose suspension components, steering components, no loose subframe bushings, any of those types of things. So a thorough inspection is always a great idea before you ever get started on alignment. Let's make sure that everything is foundationally sound on the vehicle as far as suspension and steering before we even try to touch the alignment. And I should also mention there's one more thing that may need to be done post-alignment. A lot of modern cars have advanced driver assistance systems. We call them ADAS systems. These systems are things like your blind spot monitors, parking assist, lane change assist, forward-facing cameras, your radar for cruise control. All of these things are part of your ADAS system. Now, all these components that are on here do require a calibration. So if you've got a modern vehicle, it's possible after you've done your alignment that you may need to recalibrate some of those things. It's a whole different process, a lot more complicated as far as the equipment that's involved. And you know, we're not going to get into that in this video, but I wanted to mention that if you've got a vehicle that's modern, you're getting an alignment done, especially if it needs any severe adjustments, that's probably something that's going to happen. In my hand here, I've got a target that has to be mounted to the wheel. I actually got 4 of these we're going to install. And these targets are designed to work in conjunction with the 3D cameras that are installed on the main beam, the main frame of this alignment machine. Those cameras are going to project down towards this and make a measurement. That's why we need one on each wheel. So as we install these targets on each wheel, they're going to clamp on the outside of these rims. There's little hooks on them, and then we can adjust them so they clamp around the outside diameter of the rim in between the tire and the rim. Okay, they don't have to be very tight. They just need to be installed on here. We're going to put them in vertically, and we want to make sure these targets are facing outward towards where the cameras are going to be pointing towards them. I also should mention that when we're doing a wheel alignment, there's generally a specific type of lift that we need to use. This is a drive-on lift. We need the suspension completely loaded and settled on the tires when we're making our measurements, and that's what this lift allows us to do. It also is fitted with special turntables in the front. Once we pull the pins on these turntables, it's going to allow these wheels to float freely on bearings as we turn the wheel left and right to make some measurements. Same thing is going to happen in the rear. There's giant panels on the back we can pull the pins on. They're called slip plates or skid plates. Once we pull those pins out, that allows that rear wheel to move around, float a little bit in place while we have the weight on the car, so when we're making adjustments, they're accurate. Next step is we need to get the vehicle programmed into the software so it knows what specifications to use for the alignment on this vehicle. We're going to scroll through here until we get to Lexus. You'll see there's a lot of choices on here. Probably not cars that we're going to work on here in the US, they just don't exist, but these cars are all over the world, and depending where you're at, you may have one of these. We need to select our model. We're working on an RX 300. And then we need to know if it's 2-wheel, 4-wheel, or standard. It's got some options on it. And then, of course, the year, range. We're working on a 2003 model. And then what it's done for us is given us the specifications from the manufacturer and a range, operating range of those specifications. So we try to get somewhere in the middle, and that's what we'll do once we get into the alignment. The next step for us is to perform the run-out compensation. The machine is going to ask us to roll the car backwards and then roll it forwards again. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to measure if there's any run-out within the wheels. It's going to try to compensate for a wheel that may be bent somewhere. Maybe the targets aren't put on perfectly, and it's trying to get a precise measurement, so it wants to make sure it can compensate for those things. So we've taken a couple of steps to set the brake on here to hold the wheels steady. And then we're going to go ahead and start what they call a caster swing. So now the machine is going to ask us to turn the steering wheel 10 degrees to the left. It's going to make a measurement. And then we're going to turn it 20 degrees to the left. It's going to make another measurement. And then we're going to take this all the way to the steering lock. Now it wants us to go slowly back past center, and we're going to go 10 degrees to the right. And then 20 degrees to the right. And then all the way to the steering lock on the right. And then we're going back to 0. Now that we've done all that, the machine has given us its alignment measurements. It gives us specifications and measurements for the rear as well as the front. Right now we're looking at the rear. And there's a couple of angles on here that it's going to give us the measurements for. If we go to the front, it gives us an additional set of measurements. So the front is usually more important than the rear, as far as there might be an additional angle that we might be able to adjust on there. So I don't want to get too in depth of what all these angles mean. I can tell you that we're trying to adjust the way the tires are pointing. So are the tires pointing in or out? That's the toe setting. Is the top pushing in or out? That's the camber setting. And then we've got a third setting that you can't really see in the tires and does not affect the tire wear any, and that's called the caster setting. All those adjustments need to be made in order to get the car to drive straight and not wear the tires, and make sure your steering wheel is centered. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish with these. You're going to get a much better driving experience when your car is properly aligned, in addition to those other features, tire wear and stuff. It's important to know that not every vehicle has adjustability in all of these different measurements, okay? Some vehicles may only be able to adjust the toe, some you might be able to adjust the toe and the camber, and then some you might be able to adjust all three of these alignment angles. There's actually a couple of other alignment angles in there that may be measured and definitely can't be adjusted. So just, I guess if I was going to take anything away from this, I would tell you that alignments can get very complicated to do properly. Sometimes there's a lot of procedure involved in it. We talked about some of the calibration for the driver assistance features, the ADAS systems, and there's also a lot of procedures involved. Sometimes you have to put weights in the car. There's complicated procedures for making adjustments, and just want to let you know that the alignments aren't always simple. Sometimes they can get really involved, especially if you want to do them correctly. So when we're in the rear of the vehicle and we're trying to make an adjustment here, you're going to see something like this, and you'll see how it's got an offset washer on it basically. And what that allows us to do is loosen this up and then turn this a few degrees in either direction in order to push this wheel out or pull it back in. And really that's what we're trying to achieve when we do an alignment. Now, this vehicle doesn't have a bunch of adjustments on it, so there's not a lot more I can show you on it, but in the rear, there's one adjustment here that we can use. When we move to the front of the vehicle, you're going to see something similar in here. This is the tie rod end. There's an inner and an outer and an adjustment here in the threads. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this tie rod longer or shorter, depending if we want to push this wheel out or in on the back side, out or in on the front side. So this adjustment here just it changes the length enough to turn the wheel. There are other adjustments in here on this control arm that's right here. There might be some other adjustments like we saw in the back in order to push this ball joint outwards or inward. This particular vehicle doesn't have that, so nothing we can adjust on here. But I did want to mention too that over here where the control arm bolts to it, there is a subframe, and sometimes this subframe can be moved in order to get some of these measurements within specification. Thanks for following along with me in this video. I was hoping not to overcomplicate a complicated subject, but I wanted to definitely give you a sneak peek into what's going on in the background when you bring your vehicle into a garage for an alignment. This is kind of the process for most places, and to give you some of that insight as some of the things you might be looking out for, especially if you have a modern vehicle like I talked to you about earlier in the video. So thanks for following along with me. Really appreciate you watching our content. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and check out another video. Thanks for your support. We appreciate it.